I am Dr. Henry, Principal, St.Jude College, Thoothoor. I am so happy to introduce this webinar organized by Department of History, St.Jude College, Thoothoor. Honorable resource persons from Madras, respected Dr. Nelson Bhaskaran, convener and head of the Department of History, Dr. Freena and Dr. Rajivan Lal, coordinators of this webinar and faculty of the History Department, dear colleagues, beloved participants, I earnestly welcome you all for this webinar arranged by History Department of St.Jude College, Thoothoor. The role of downtrodden, native of Madras Presidency, Parayans in their social life is not well known to many of us. In the second day, the webinar has an interesting topic, revisiting the role of Parayans in the Madras Presidency Army, 1801 to 1895, by Dr. Manas Datta, Assistant Professor, Department of History, Aliyah University, Calcutta, West Bengal. He has 10 publications in journals and conferences regarding this topic. I welcome Dr. Manas Datta for this webinar on behalf of the History Department, myself and the St.Jude College, Thoothoor. Thank you one and all.
Hi everybody, I am Dr. Manas Datta, Assistant Professor, Department of History, Aliyah University, Kolkata, West Bengal. At the very outset, I would like to thank the Principal, Dr. C. Henry of St.Jude College, Thoothoor, Kunnakumari, and especially my friend Dr. Nelson Bhaskaran for giving me the opportunity to say the lecture on the Parayans, one of the important subcaste, Dalit subcaste of Madras Presidency, and their subsequent position in the Madras Presidency Army, roughly from 1801 to 1895. And also I would like to thank the coordinator of the department, Dr. T. Farina, Assistant Professor, and Dr. D. Rajivan Lal, Assistant Professor of the department. So before going to start my lecture, I would like to say that the lecture is divided primarily into three parts. In the first part, I would like to say something on the ongoing research on the military history or currently happening in India and the South Asia in general, both colonial and post-colonial, taking into consideration these two periods. And then I would talk about the Parayans and how they have become part of the British Indian Army or the Madras Presidency Army since 1801 to 1895 roughly. And then finally I would try to wrap up by putting my observation why these Parayans have been deleted their position from this army and why they have not been taken into consideration after 1895 by the British colonial authority. So, in the concluding remark, I would like to say something on how I can conclude my paper and how I can revisit the position of the Parayans at this very present moment. So now I start my first theme, that how we can conceptualize the military history in colonial and post-colonial India and why it has been gaining so important at this present moment in the academics. So initially what we can see is that if we see after the independence of India in 1947 to 1950s or 60s, we see the rise of the research and the interest of the academia on the economic history. So after that, from 1960 to 1970, we see the rise of the political history, doing research on the political history. Then we have been able to see that from 1917 to 1980, the expansion of the cultural history or the researches on cultural history. So under this domain, we have seen military history arises out of this as a sub-theme, and this has been taken into consideration by the Indian academia, and it has been part of the mainstream academic history. But we must remember in this point that people going to say that in 1950s we have seen the rise of the military history and doing research on the military history both in the European continent and also in the US. So 1980s was the time when we have been able to see various kinds of military history or doing researches on military history has been in the forefront, academics. So which was not been taken into consideration earlier, now it has been gaining ground in this scenario. So who are responsible for this? Who has important in this section? So we may say the names of the Amiya Barat, who has done a tremendous work on the Bengal Presidency Army and the discipline of the Bengal Army in 1962 from the London University. Then we have the Doyen of Indian history, Sir Jodhunath Sarkar, his path-breaking books on the battles of Indian history. Then we have seen the Horoprasad Chattopadhyay from Calcutta University, the social composition of the Sepoy Army in 1857, and we have various others. But currently, this trend has been taken up by none other than Dr. Kaushik Rai from Jadavpur University, who has done a commendable, considerable work on the various aspects of colonial and post-colonial army. And then, of course, we have Dr. Anirudh Deshpande from Delhi University, Professor Parthasarathi Gupta, and few others who have been instrumental in doing research in this military history. So, since 1990s, we have been able to see various branches relating to the military history has been gaining ground, and it has been caught the attention of the current mainstream academic histories. So which was earlier was a neglected part of the Indian history. Now this has become visible, this has become noticeable, this has become important for the student, both student and researcher of our country. Now in the second part, what I can say is that who are these Parayans. So why I am taking this topic as today's deliberation, and why I am trying to revisit my position, revisiting the position of the Parayans and their contributing role for the great Indian army under the colonial period. So at this very outset in this section, I would like to say that who are these Parayans. Parayans is a Tamil word. Parayans are coming from a word parai, who is generally termed as a drama, who is associated with this kind of work, festivals, funerals, and few other work where they have been involved. And basically, they have been part of this Madras Presidency since time immemorial, and they have been the basic, primarily the agricultural section of the society. So primarily, they have been tied with the lands. So with the advent of the British colonial force in India, they have been trying to be part of this British army since they have taken it as a position, as a condition, prerequisite for this Indian army, and how they been part of this army and how they taken it as a agent of social mobilization for their own livelihood and survival in the caste-ridden society of the colonial India. So we must remember here that Parayans are basically one of the important Dalit subcaste of Tamil Nadu, the then Tamil Nadu, the Madras Presidency, and a very influential and significant part of this great Madras society. So we cannot simply ignore their role, their position, and their societal improvement in this section. So coming of the British and constituting the army in taking the help from the Indian natives, they have trying to be part of this, and this was been a very important factor for their overall development in colonial period. So in that sense, this position of these Parayans in the Madras Presidency Army and their subsequent position in the later on Dalit movement or Dalit political agendas has been simply overlooked earlier by the social scientists, anthropologists, and their position has been generally ignored by the military historians. till date. But in this section, I would like to say that few people are responsible who have been instrumental in bringing this aspect, bringing the position of the Parayans and their heartfelt sacrifice, their valor, their gallantry for their countrymen into the academics. So I must remember, I must thankful to them that they have been able to locate the history, unheard, unwritten history of these Parayans in the Madras Presidency Army. So in this case, I would like to say Henry Dodwell, who first initiated the process in Madras Presidency, in the Sepoy recruitment in the old Madras Army. In that tiny book of 75 pages, he has wonderfully discussed the position Parayans held in the army. Has been wonderfully discussed by Dodwell. Taking clue from Dodwell, it was Professor Rajshekhar Bosu from the University of Calcutta, Department of History, and of course N. Rajendran from the Department of History, Bharatidasan University, who have taken keen interest in exploring the Parayans in the Madras Presidency, not confining themselves within the army, but of course their association with the Christian missionaries, their association with the politics as a whole. And of course in that case, I must say that John Wilson and Adivulagan from Madras around that time, they have wrote extensively on the Madras army, and parts of that book has been developed and of course devoted for the role explained by them in for the Parayans in the Madras Presidency. So it is not so unnoticeable events, it is not so unavoidable events which is simply ignored by the mainstream academic history in Tamil Nadu and of course in the great Indian society. So this is this is my intention, this is my intervention in this case, that we should bring the role played by the Parayans in the Madras Presidency Army has to be come into the forefront, has to be part of the mainstream academic research. In those who are responsible for the current military history research in India and of course in the Western academia, they have been instrumental in exploring various positions held by the various group of our country, but keeping very limited or neglected eye on the Parayans. So say for example the mainstream military historians like Kaushik Roy, like Anirudh Deshpande, Parthasarathi Gupta, they have tried to focus on this, but more and more attention has to be paid for their overall performance in and around the Madras Presidency Army. So here I am thankful to of course Nima Cheria, who has written a very wonderful article on the Madras Army, which was published in the Social Scientist. And then of course we have Rupa Vishwanath, the Paraya Problem and Caste, Religion and the Social in Modern India, is a very crucial book. Of course Rajshekhar Basu, Nandanath's Children's, Tamil Parayans Traced with Destiny, 1856 to 1956. So that those books are very useful in understanding the position held by the Parayans in the Madras Presidency Army. So now I have taken why I am going to say all these things. So before going to that, I must say that the social position and the social composition of the Madras Army has to be taken into consideration. Otherwise we can't be able to put light on this. So we have an idea of pre-1857 recruitment of the Madras Presidency Army. As we all know, we have three presidencies army, Bengal, Bombay and Madras Presidency Army since 1800 onwards. And then we have the post 1857 recruitment scenario. So 1857, the Great Revolt of 1857 is a very catastrophic and a very significant watershed moment in modern Indian history, and that event actually simply changed the socio-recruitmental process of the three presidency army. So in this case, I must say the pre-1857 recruitment, social composition of the Madras Presidency is slightly different those of the post-1857 recruitment, social recruitment of the Madras Presidency Army. So, if we consider the incident of the past Madras Regiment or Madras Infantry Regiment, in which was formed in 1824, we see that there are rise of the lower caste people, rise of the sub-caste people, rise of the untouchable, and their significant contribution in the army, considering the scenario around that time. If we consider the Bengal army, if we consider the Bombay army, considering all those things, Madras army was the first army establishment which actually gave a considerable position for the lower caste people, and that is one of the reasons why these lower caste people, one of the lower caste people or Dalit sub-caste called Parayans, were gaining ground in the Madras Presidency Army. But simply in this section, we should not think that this joining the army as a sepoys, as a soldiers of the British Indian Army is simply a very simple event. It is not so simple, because most of the Tamil high caste people, Tamil high caste Brahmins, were simply ignoring to be part of this great Indian Army or British Indian Army around that time, because they were landowning classes. They did not pay full attention for this, but it was the Parayans who actually thought of becoming one of the important classes of the society by joining the army, so that it can be a part of their social mobilization. Joining the army is seen as a social mobilization for these lower caste people, and this actually helping them to be associated with the caste-driven Indian society around that time. So army and lower caste connection around that time is very crucial here, because these lower caste people or this degraded caste or this dishonored group or this unheard group actually helping the British Indian Army to occupy or to expand their imperial force to imperial agendas all over the country and beyond that. Now, I must say here that we all know that if we read Nicholas Dark's or any other works by Dipankar Gupta, caste has been a very crucial component of the Indian society since the birth of this civilization. So we cannot do away with the caste at this moment, and we all see at this present Indian scenario that caste has become so crucial and caste issue has become so deep-rooted in our society that one cannot simply ignore the caste hierarchy or caste-ridden scenario in the Indian subcontinent. So this was partly responsible around that time, and the Dalit called this Dalit sub called this Parayans was also not exceptional in this case. They have been also been ignored because of these caste situations. So initially the British government was not so optimistic about these caste issues, caste complex issues around that time, but they were been playing a very safe game in understanding the society around that time. So if we try to project here the works of H.D. Lowe, Vestiges of Old Madras, 1600 to 1800, 2 volumes book, we see that the various occupational caste groups who were employed in the Madras army was very dutiful and very docile to the soil. If we try to argue the American military, American political theorist or political scientist Stephen Peter Rosen and Stephen Peter Cohen, they have extensively worked on the caste issues and the Indian army. So if we try to argue here of the works of Stephen Cohen, we say that this is much beneficial for the Britisher to occupy their position and try to project their expansionist ideology around this southern country. His wonderful book in that Indian Army, its contribution to the development of a nation, he again and again trying to project that this Dalit subcaste played a very important role or rather a significant position, held a very significant position in the army. Of course, if we try to argue with the line of Stephen Peter Rosen, he also said the Indian society is a very caste decisive society. So caste issue has become a very crucial. One cannot do away with that. So one has to be associated, one has to be taken into the caste difficulties or caste complexities while considering the position of these lower caste society of our country to be part of their force, military force. So of course later we have seen the DeWitt C. Elinud and Chantia E. N. Lowe. They actually tried to project that in their wonderful book, edited volume, Caste Ethnicity in Modern Asia, where they said Indian society is really a fragmented mode of thing. So this fragmentary situation actually gave rise to complex issues that cannot be simply avoided in terms of this recruitment process. So this fragmented issue is associated definitely with religion, with culture, with language, and of course with political influences. So this pre-1857 recruitment in the Madras Presidency and the caste composition is definitely important issue here, where we can see the more than 20% to 45% involvement of these Dalit Parayans in the Madras Presidency Army. So we all know that the 1857 Great Revolt of 1857 is definitely a shattering moment for the great Indian society as large, and the British government, the colonial government, has tried to explain their position, tried to revisit their position considering the current scenario. So this has become a shocking moment for the Britishers, that this 1857 Sepoy Mutiny actually tried to make them rethink about their position, revisit their position, and slowly we have seen the appointment of the Peel Commission in 1858 to 59, who actually argued in favor, the commission actually argued in favor of the from caste composition to class composition, and these actually gave birth to the rise of the martial race theory and the involvement of the martial classes in the Indian three presidency army. So I will take up that issue a bit later, but before going to that, we must say here that war and society approach, which has been generally accepted since 1960s in the Western academia, and now it has been part of the Indian military history groups, where they have said this war and society approach actually trying to project army as a modernizing agent for those socially degraded, socially dishonored or socially backward class once they have become part of this army. So this school actually trying to project their position by saying that this modernizing agency, this kind of association would definitely help the lower caste people like Parayans, like lower caste people, and their position in the society, trying to improve their position by joining in the army. So that issue has to be taken into consideration while we talk about the position held by the Parayans in the Madras Presidency army. So, in the post 1857 military recruitment in the Madras Presidency, we see that in the initial, despite the initial bias in the high caste recruitment, the Madras British government, while considering the Madras Presidency army, went in favor of the recruiting of the lower caste people, because these lower caste people or these Dalit sub-caste people, actually they were out of these caste prejudices, they were out of this any kind of religious prejudices, and they were held crucial to go beyond the Indian subcontinent, because the issue of Kalapani was very bad thing for the Tamil high caste people or the high caste people of our country as a general, but where this crossing the Kalapani issue has become not so important to this Tamil subcaste or these lower caste people around that time. So they were partly taken into the overseas expedition. They were being sent to China, they were being sent to Mauritius, they were being sent to beyond that, but not the Tamil high caste people, because they considered crossing the Kalapani was a very degraded thing, and they will definitely be not so prominent in the society once they cross the Kalapani or the water of the sea. So now we may say here that certain other things, that why Parayans has taken the job so seriously. In this respect, we must say various arguments put forwarded by the social and military historians around that time. But before that, we must record our few incidents here, that why this army has been proved to be a very crucial component for the lives of the Parayans in the Madras Presidency army. As we all see, all know that three different land revenue system in Bengal, Madras and Bombay actually created havoc problems for these lower caste people or these tiny landowning classes. There was no problem for the zamindars, there was no problem for these gomastas and high baniyas around that time, but problem was associated with these lower caste people, because they were being deliberately not being part of the society, and this has been a deliberately done by the high caste people. As we currently all know that this America is running through a very bad shape, not because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but of course the death of the George Floyd and the Dalit Lives Matter. So here, why I am bringing this issue here, because this death of George Floyd is one of the black people, black African American is not the new thing in America, because this Dalit Lives Matter movement is going on for the last couple of years over there, but we have seen these kind of things happening over here in the colonial period as well. And we would be surprised to know that people like B.R. Ambedkar, who is one of the proponents of the incorporation of these Dalit people in the army, who is hailing from he himself is hailing from a military community called Mahar community from the Bombay Presidency. And of course we have I can say here few things on W.E.B. Du Bois, who is the exponent, one of the crucial exponents of the African American black movement in America, who has written letter to B.R. Ambedkar, who has written letter to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who has a connection with Mahatma Gandhi as well, because this Ambedkar, Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois, and of course Mahatma Gandhi, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, they were all in favor of projecting this Dalit group or Dalit subcaste group in the society, and they were all in favor of arguing that they should be part of the Indian army, be it the Bengal Presidency Army, Bombay Presidency Army or the Madras Presidency Army. So they must be issue that has taken into consideration, that has seriously taken up around that time. So in 1861 onwards, the kind of discussion was going on in the colonial level, the colonial British official, that instead of having three presidency armies, Bengal, Bombay or Madras, we should have one Indian army, and this three presidency army should be part of the great Indian army. So why? Because they have seen these groups, these British are actually initially they have been very held a good opinion, a better opinion for this Dalit subcaste and their performance in the army. But after 1857, this catastrophic moment in Indian history has simply changed their attitude towards the Dalit subcaste or towards the lower caste people and their fruitful incorporation in the Indian army. So they said that if we wish to suppress the rebelliousness of these native people, or if we wish to suppress the rebellious attitude of these colonized people, we must not incorporate all this section in the army, because there might be some disagreement, there might be some dissent, there might be some debate arising out of these contemporary issues, and that can give rise to this kind of overall disagreement against the British government. So it was Frederick Roberts, Commander-in-Chief of this Indian Army around that time in 1895, who actually held responsible for the incorporation of the martial race theory in the Indian Army. So this 1870 onwards, the position of the Parayans in the Madras Presidency Army proved to be not very significant as they held the position before that. And we all know that these Parayans actually generally part of the Queen's own sappers and miners. They were very docile to the land. They were very dutiful. They were very obedient soldiers of the Madras Presidency Army. Not only obedience, but their hard work actually proved to be significant for them. So these issues simply ignored since 1870s, because the Eden Commission of 1878-79, Eden Commission actually tried to project their understanding by saying that we should go for one single army unit in a society instead of having three, and side by side we should incorporate able-bodied, physically fit people, generally coming from the northwestern frontier provinces, and of course from the UP, and of course from the Punjab section. So Punjabi Sikhs and Muslims, they have been taken into seriously in the army. So around that time onwards, since 1870s is the time where these Parayans and their heartfelt sacrifice, valor and their gallantry for their presidency, for their country, southern country, and of course for great Indian society has been simply ignored by this British government. So initially this actually caused a great anger, anguish, disagreement among them, and they tried to get back their position by putting a number of memorandum, number of their argument in favor of their incorporation in the Indian Army. But here what I said a little bit earlier, that the incorporation of this kind will definitely advocated by great B.R. Ambedkar, great W.E.B. Du Bois from USA, the exponents of Pan-African movements, and of course Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and Mahatma Gandhi. So despite their initial request, the British government has simply could not do any significant move for this Tamil subcaste people called Parayans in the Madras Presidency Army. So now in the last part of my lecture, and then I would conclude. So in the last part, why this is so? Why the heartfelt sacrifices of these Parayans have been simply ignored by this British government? Because they have been trying to overthrow this community as they are slowly moving towards this martial race theory. They are trying to incorporate the Sikhs, Pathan, the people from northwestern frontier province, and of course from the Muslim soldiers, Sikh Muslims and Muslims from the southern countries, especially Hyderabad, which has been deliberately highlighted by Nile Green, Sepoy in the Indian Army in 2016. So that book was trying to project why the British government has taken so drastic step in deleting or in avoiding their the incorporation of this Dalit subcaste in the Madras Presidency. Now, this is quite evident through the government records, through the records which are deliberately preserved in the Tamil Nadu State Archives. I have been very fortunate to N. Sundar Raj here, because he has helped me to locate those materials which have been wonderfully preserved in the Tamil Nadu State Archives, located at the Chennai city. So where we can see that this kind of documentation has been wonderfully done, wonderfully conducted, and these documentations actually projected the British and their conflicting attitude towards the Parayans, because they have done this kind of job again and again for the Parayans. So they were doubly discriminated by the Parayans from 1800 to within 1895. So initially they have been incorporated, they have been praised, they have been sent to various, not only confined to Madras Presidency, they have been sent to overseas expedition to expand the British colonial empire. But since 1870s, so when this situation arises of the 1857, so their position also changed towards the Parayans. So this has been an issue that one should take into consideration while talking about the Parayans and their involvement in the Madras Presidency Army. So it was 1894, the great Tamil Dalit community, Parayan community expert, Pandit C. Ayodhitos, and some people from the ex-Parayan soldier and ex-military officials, they have put a memorandum to the British government that their position should be improved and they should not be simply overthrown from the Madras Presidency Army. But around this time, we should remember the Russian threat around 1890s, Russian threat to India, and of course the Anglo-Afghan war actually proved to be fatal for the Madras Presidency, because their performance in the 1895 Anglo-Afghan war was very pathetic according to the British government. So that is one of the reasons for not incorporating this Tamil subcaste in the Indian Army. But that should not be the whole issue. But we should remember here that this war of Kolachel in 1754 in this Travancore, and their wonderful, and for the first time in the Indian history, that a native force consisting of the Tamil Parayan soldier proved to be detrimental, proved to be significant, and they defeated the Dutch East India Company for the first time in the southern history of the southern India. So that Kolachel war has been simply ignored in the mainstream history. So that has not been taken into consideration. This war of Kolachel actually associated with these Tamil Parayans, because their heartfelt sacrifice was proved to be very significant in this case. So here we must say that kind of conflicting attitude, that kind of derogatory position held by the British, not the first time in the Indian history, but they have repeatedly done this for our countrymen, for our native soldiers. So that is definitely a derogatory moment for them. We should not ignore their position, because here we should definitely praise in favor of these Parayans, because they are one of the important factor in the Madras Presidency Army. Now some concluding remarks in this case. So before going to wrap up my today's deliberation, today's lecture, I would like to project some of my concluding remarks here in this juncture. So how we can try to map or try to explain my lecture into 4 or 5 points. So what we have seen, that the rise of the military history, rise of the new military history, better to say, trying to project the Indian military history and its contribution in the society first. So this issue actually bring into the forefront the Parayans, one of the Tamil subcaste, Dalit subcaste of the Madras Presidency Army, their participation in the army as one of the prized recruits for the colonial army. Why I am saying these prized recruits? Because they are, from the very beginning, they are proved to be very significant for the British colonial force. So without their heartfelt sacrifice, heartfelt gallantry, the British Indian Army could never be able to project themselves in such a valorous moment. So now we can say that the Parayans and their position as a Tamil subaltern and subsequent decline in position in the Indian Army, in the Madras Presidency Army since 1895. So that issue has to be taken into seriously, because this martial race theory has proved to be detrimental for these Parayans. Because why and how they did so is a mysterious issue at the very outset, but this has been calculatively projected in the Indian psyche, in the Indian society. Next, I can say the Parayans are essentially tied to the land. They are essentially part of the agricultural section. They were with the fishermen. They were doing this kind of apparently menial jobs, but they have become so crucial after the Indian Army or the Three Presidency Army has been constituted in continuation with the British Indian Empire here. So as a aggressive slaves, which Dharma Kumar said in her books, that as a aggressive slaves, they have trying to improve their position by joining the army. So joining the army definitely proved to be very significant for them. This cannot be seriously identified at this present moment of time by people, but around that time in 1801 or before that, in the end of 17th century or the first half of 18th century, this has become a serious proposition for this Tamil subcaste or Dalit subcaste in the Madras Presidency Army. So this kind of occupational and social mobility for them was very serious affair, and one should take it into consideration while talking about the Parayans around that time. We must say that in the beginning it gave a momentum leap for the Parayans and proved to be developed a sense of identity and power and their empowerment. So sense of identity, sense of empowerment, sense of gratitude comes from this army and their subsequent joining. Because joining the Madras Presidency Army, these kind of avenues have been opened, have been remain open for them, and they have simply utilized those issues. Because this kind of caste hierarchy, this kind of caste driven situation, this kind of caste issues has only been do away with this joining the army. So this caste issue has to be brought into the forefront and trying to project their own position into that, because these caste complexities actually not to help them but to make them out of all these problems. Now we can say that this this British Indian Empire, or to say the colonial empire, tried to educate them and trying to train them from one of the menial class to one of the important societal group community in the British Indian Army. So it was not so derogatory initially for them, which was later reflected in the writings or in the official records of the Madras Presidency Army. Here I must say that one should read the works of C.D. Maclean, who has produced the manual of administration of the Madras Presidency, where we can see every year the caste composition of the Madras Presidency Army. Various other issues has been taken into the forefront. Along with that, we have seen the percentage presence of the lower caste people in the Madras Army from 1858, and these documents are preserved in the Tamil Nadu State Archives. And then of course we should read Edgar Thurston, Caste and Tribes of Southern India. That voluminous works on caste and tribes of Southern India put light on the Parayans. We must mention the works of V. Gita and H.B. Rajadurai to understand this Parayan community and their involvement in the Madras Presidency Army, and after 1895 their political position, their creation of their own association, Dalit Association, and to fight for the Dalit movement in the southern country. Recently there is a book written by Amit Ahuja, who actually trying to project the various Dalit groups in India. One of them is of course Parayans of Madras Presidency, and the name of the book is Mobilizing the Marginalized, where one section is being devoted for them, and that actually showcase the transformation of the Parayans from agricultural group to one of the important Dalit subcaste of the Madras Presidency Army, and how Ayutthaya and of course his father-in-law Rattamalai Srinivasan, and how they formed the Adi Dravida Mahajan Sabha, a caste association for the improvement of the Parayans in 1891, and how they put forwarded their memorandum, their anguish, their dissent towards the British colonial government and their position they repeatedly request that the British government should reconsider their position. And one must be happy to know that if we see the contribution of the Indian Army in the First World War 1914 to 1918, we see a considerable number of Parayans from the Madras Presidency participated in the overseas war front on behalf of the British Indian Army, and they have performed very well. So this was the repeated memorandum, repeated movement done by this Ayutthaya and his father-in-law Rattamalai Srinivasan, who actually held that one should not simply ignore the performances, sacrifices of the Parayans in the Madras Presidency Army. Of course, I recommend two articles. One should read these two articles: Philip Constable, The Marginalization of a Dalit Martial Class in late 19th and early 20th century Western India, and of course Stephen P. Cohen, The Untouchable Soldier, Caste, Politics and the Indian Army. These two important articles actually wonderfully trying to project the position held by the so-called lower caste people of our country in the Indian Army. So I hope I have been able to make some sense or I have been able to address the issues of the Parayans and their heartfelt sacrifice for the Madras Presidency Army. So in this current day scenario where the country of our country, the India, is passing through a very bad shape due to some social exclusivist and various other things, that we should not do away with this, and we should remember these groups and their heartfelt sacrifices for our countrymen. This has not been this should not be read as isolation, but one should remember that this actually is part of our mainstream history. It should be recorded in the mainstream history. It should not be read as isolation. One should know from, but instead of writing the history from top down, we should start the process from down, which is already been said by the subaltern group of historians, but we should implement it and we should go ahead with this. So with this, I conclude my lecture today. I am again thankful to the organization of the Department of History of St. Joseph's College, and of course the principal of St. Joseph College, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much. Thank you.